welcome to Peace at Home Parenting. We've had a bumpy start today, but we're delighted to be with you. And I'm deeply, deeply honored to have the guests who are going to be teaching with me today. They're all Peace at Home teachers and seasoned, knowledgeable, and very passionate parenting educators in very unique ways. And we are talking about parenting, culture, and parenting styles today. And I'm going to ask folks to introduce themselves, and I'll start with you, Na. Will you please just let folks know about you? And I just want to remind everybody that as we're going along, you can send questions in chat, you can raise your hand. We really love hearing from you. So Na, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for your patience. And my name is Na Zhang. Well, my full-time job is an assistant professor in human development and family sciences at the University of Connecticut. But besides that, I have been working with Ruth and Peace at Home Parenting for almost half a year and really share a lot of our value in educating parents. And really excited today to talk with you about culture. I'm originally from China and so familiar with the China Asian culture, and so happy to share in my experiences.
And I want to add that Na is training as a mindfulness-based stress reduction trainer and does research on mindfulness and parenting. And I find that very inspiring. And soon Na is going to be teaching her own classes in mindfulness. Thank you. Tanika.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. I'm Tanika Eves, and I am a licensed clinical social worker specializing in maternal infant mental health. And I'm also an assistant professor in the undergraduate social work program at Fairfield University. And I have been working with Ruth as a parent educator with Peace at Home for almost a year now. And I just love the work and have been it's just enriched all aspects of my life. I'm also a grandchild of the Great Migration. Both of my grandparents migrated north from the South way back in the 30s and 40s. And those experiences have also sort of shaped me. So really glad to be here.
Dr. Katina.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Katina Caban-Owen. I am a doctor in social work and ethnic medicine. I am a part-time professor both at UConn and Eastern with social workers. And I am passionate about children and families, as I have been a social worker in the town of Windham for 43 years. A lot of it in the school systems. And when I retired, I joined the Board of Education, as I am interested in keeping children healthy, mentally, physically, and learning. Nice to be here.
Thanks, Katina. Katina is an angel of children in the town of Windham. So I want to start our conversation. First, I want to acknowledge that culture and parenting is very complicated from the outside. Each of you have done original research around parenting and child development. And I'm a parenting educator that reads the research, but you are more deeply involved in the action of research. But I want to say that from the outside, the idea of culture and parenting is always daunting to me. And I think that a big challenge for all of us is to stay learners while we're trying to learn at the same time. My daughter calls herself a diversity cadet, and she's often talking to me about the importance of including diversity as we're teaching parenting. And I love it. I want to start with a specific question, which is one of the research pieces that I've always leaned on was a study of families, mostly from Western European culture, that looked at parenting styles and outcomes for kids. And when they looked at parenting styles, they looked at degrees of permissiveness all the way through authoritarian strictness. They looked at what they called psychological intrusiveness or criticism or, put downs in the parenting. And they looked at, what was the third category? It was strictness, and it was like relationship, how the parent related to the child, warm versus cold or rejecting, all the way from warm and to cold and rejecting. And when they looked at these, what they came up with, what I take from that research is, if you're warm, if you're high on warm and moderate on discipline, meaning not too strict, not too soft, so and very low on what they called psychological intrusiveness or negative messages to kids. And we call that firm and friendly parenting or firm and kind parenting. That kids saw the best outcomes in terms of school, accomplishment, and in terms of mental health. However, that research was not always, it was replicated a little bit in other cultures, but I would love to hear from each of you about that idea of firm and kind parenting and how that fits in with your heritage and what you know about the culture that you grew up in and parenting practices. I know it's a complicated question.
Oh my, are you asking all of us? And first of all, I do not want to generalize regarding all Latinx families and the different migration patterns we have. I consider myself also a migrant, even when I came from Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico, we are citizens. So that's just the very basic. Do not generalize, please. What I have seen in my particular Puerto Rican experience is that parents need to be stern with their children, very direct, and at the same time defend them from the whole universe with gusto, so the child gets kind of different messages about how to be. So go to grandma for love and care in, being a little spoiled, or aunts and uncles, but mom and dad both show sternness and love once in a while. So, that's what I have seen. I don't know what my colleagues.
Katina, do you know if that approach is in relation to in response to racism that people grow up with, or is that natural in the culture? Like if you're living in Puerto Rico and you're growing up in Puerto Rico, is that just the style of the culture? Is that?
Well, let me have a political statement here. Since we have always been colonized and always have been in an oppressive system, we have always been defending ourselves, right? But at the same time, it happens. I have observed it in multiple social levels as well as educational levels. You're strong and stern, and then you defend your child from the world.
Great, thank you so much, Katina. Who would like to also comment? We're talking about that research around parenting styles, firm and friendly, with people of Western European heritage, and how that is similar or different from what you understand from your own culture.
I'm happy to jump in. And like Katina, I do not want to generalize, but I think there's quite a lot written about the experiences of African descendant families trying to navigate American culture. And I think Katina said something very sort of the need to defend. So there is this level of firmness that I think often gets interpreted as harshness, particularly in science and research. I've done work with sort of coding parent-child interactions and consistently find that when we're looking at African descendant mothers in particular and their children, they often get rated as harsh. And that always bothers me because I don't think, I think that many times we are trying to prepare, it's hard to be firm and kind to prepare your child to survive in a world that's not going to be firm and kind to them, that's going to be hostile to them. So I think there's a lot of protectiveness that gets perhaps interpreted as misinterpreted as harshness and rigidity. And it's this, I can speak from my personal experience of having grandparents who sort of fled the South because it was, you know, outwardly dangerous place to be, and then having to learn how to navigate in New York City where the dangers were more insidious and less obvious. And how do you protect your children, but also how do you prepare them to, you want them to be successful, you want them to reach their potential, but you also know that they're going to have to exist in a world that doesn't believe in their humanity. And then how do you instill in them their own belief in their humanity? So I think it's very, very complicated. And I'm not sure that these parenting models have taken all of those things into account.
Absolutely.
And Tanika, what would you replace the word harsh with in their observations if you could do it more compassionately and insightfully based on what you understand about the motivations of the behavior? Is there a better word?
I mean, so I have played around with like defended, but I do feel like it's a protective mechanism. It is sort of this mechanism of I'm trying to, and we like, you know, toughen you up. I do not like the term tough love, but that's what gets used a lot. But really, it's like, I'm trying to fortify you to survive. And so sometimes the gentleness, and not to say that, of course, that's a part of it, but sometimes I think that is, you're afraid, you don't want them to be expecting gentleness when they leave the house, because that could be very dangerous. So it's a very delicate balance, I think.
Yeah,
Totally.
So now, what thoughts do you have about this from your own perspective? This is, there's so much in here to unpack, but
Yeah, like you said, so much to unpack, and I totally echo what the other speakers today said. So when you say firm and kind parenting, you're trying to use two words to describe all different sorts of parenting behaviors, and these two words could mean really different things in different culture or in different families. Because families could, even some families live in the same culture, but they could have different values and belief systems. So the parenting literature is only probably around 100 years old. And most of research on parenting has been conducted in not so diverse populations, and we all heard about the weirdest population that has been used as human subject in research. Weird stands for Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. So
wait, I haven't heard that before. Can you say that again?
Okay, so weird. There's an article about this, and said a lot of our research on humans have been conducted in populations that are Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. And so the weirdest population, and they are driving our knowledge and science on parenting. And so that's what Tanika was saying, these parenting models, they don't apply to other families in different cultures. And in science, we use these two terms, form and function, to describe parenting. So forms are, say, behaviors that you can see what the parents did. And then function are the meanings that those parents make out of their parenting behaviors. So same parenting behaviors could have different functions across culture. When you say firm and kind, you're not describing parenting behaviors, you're also not describing parenting functions. So we need to be more specific about the parenting behaviors that we're thinking about, and really try to understand the meanings and what values and, like you said, motivation, intention behind the parenting behaviors to really understand the cultural impact.
So this is inspiring. I'm really excited that we're all together. Katina.
Ruth, I totally agree. I'm sorry. And let's add, they have been those research mostly made by men on top of it. So let's all those words in men. And yes, I totally about structure, form, function, about the parenting intent within the context that they have and the layers of culture that they are experiencing and come from, because, right, is within the context of their social environment, and therefore all the invisible forces that are affecting that parent at that single time, from the physiological to the spiritual. So it's super complicated. And when I use stern and kind, is because it's a common word, right, that we can all relate to, but you're absolutely correct. It doesn't describe the intent or the style specific to the time. Thank you.
So go ahead, Tanika.
I was just gonna say, if I may add to that, right? So structure, form, function, intent, also autonomy, parental autonomy. So we, we have this body of research that, and I think we need to call it what it is. It has been a white, Western, industrialized, upper middle class, educated, nuclear family model, dictated by males for everyone else to sort of conform to. And so like this idea that your child is yours to develop and shape and raise and guide. So for people of African descent in the USA, that is about a 60-year-old concept. If you think about parental autonomy and that your children belonging to you and that you are able to have control. So I think, and that may be true for other groups who are coming as migrants, who have been colonized. So I think that's really critical to this conversation as well. Like, how can you begin to think about intention if your child is not truly your child? If at any moment your child is,
can you elaborate on that idea that your child isn't really your child? Can you just elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, I mean, we have, let's just look at the past 100 years. We won't even talk about slavery, where like your child could be, sold the next morning. Let's just talk about indigenous children who were removed from their parents without parental consent to be Americanized. Let's talk about the foster care system and the ways in which people are identified as being fit or deserving to parent. That all speaks to parental autonomy or migration. And if you are forced to be separate from your child because you can't both leave your country of origin at the same time, and then the government gets involved, like, how do you really have autonomy as a parent?
Yes. And let's talk about child labor. I mean, it was almost the other day that the United States, based on animal cruelty, and I'm looking at my two little dogs, changed those laws. So yes, and we blame parents for everything. You're supposed to be this provider and this amazing person, but we don't have any of the supports.
So all of us are engaged in this enterprise of supporting parents. And we challenge ourselves to share with parents what research is telling us. And we're always trying to stay up with that. One of the most important aspects of this, both before this conversation, I mean, Tanika, when you were talking, I was getting goosebumps and it's hard for me to think. So if I'm not making sense, let me know. But what you said was so important. I feel like we should be stopping and and I guess I'm responding to it as imperfectly as I can. So one of the things I'm thinking a lot about now, especially, post-pandemic world, is epigenetics, how our environment shapes our genetics, what our environment pulls out of our genetic makeup. And then also toxic stress, chronic threat physiology, and trauma. And those aren't all the same thing, but they're related. And what do you think, what do you think are the things that don't come from the weird research? What do you think are the keys that we can share with parents that are respectful of culture, but still understanding the biology of trauma and chronic threat physiology? What are some of the essentials that you think we can get behind without being insensitive to cultural differences? And I know these are huge questions, and to whatever degree you can answer them will be helpful.
Well, I like to just get the conversation started. That's I think part of my work in my research lab and in my writing and teaching of mindfulness and mindful parenting. Most of the research on parenting has so far really focused on the behavior aspect, what parents should be doing. How should they show their warmth and responsiveness? How should they discipline their child or supervise their child? How should they have the conversations with their child about race or emotions and complex issues? And just start probably in the past few years, with the emerging scientific evidence around parenting, mindful parenting and mindfulness, we're starting to think about mindfulness for parents. So can we really teach parents what is really important for you as a parent? What is this sort of sense of being a parent? Can you feel your own emotions and thoughts and maybe your bodily reactions when you are interacting with your child? And when you talk about biology of stress and trauma, those are in our body. And we have all these stress symptoms, and that can show up in our parent-child relationships and interactions. So if we can really teach parents to, instead of highly emphasizing the outer world of their parenting, but the inner world of their parenting, look inwardly, reflect their own value and belief and their own experiences of being raised by their own parents and the trauma and stress, how that affects their parent-child relationship. I think that's so important, and it has so much potential to change how we think about parenting.
I love what you just said. And as you were saying it, my own biological stress was growing, because I have sat in front of, I don't know how many parents, and my Latino parents would say, with what time? And I believe totally in mindfulness, and I practice every day. With what time? And that sounds selfish, that I would take time for myself. And the mothers specifically, the guys would look at me and roll their eyes. The mothers would say, that's selfish. That's like, I don't have time for these things. It's like ridiculous. So in my cultural milieu, I go back to what is their religion. So my back door, talking about parenting, is what's your religion? And then with your religion, how do you practice, instead of mindfulness, prayer, meditation? I use the vocabulary of whatever religion the person is having or practicing or have been taught, in order to get to the same end. But if I called it take time for yourself or mindfulness or, meditate, it will be like defensive.
So now you're talking about how to teach mindfulness, and I agree there are so many biases, stereotypes about the M word. Sometimes we just cannot say the M word, mindfulness or even meditation. So whatever way that works with your population, just use it.
Thank you.
I want to say that this is a paradox, because when parents are stressed, they get more problems.
Mm-hmm.
It's a paradox to convince someone who hasn't had experience calming their brain. It's hard, as Katina's pointing out, it's hard to make a connection between a calmer brain and kids that may end up being more cooperative. And it's really understanding brain biology, which is so sophisticated now, but learning to translate it. But I want to come back to the unique traits of the culture that you grew up in. Can you all talk a little bit about, is there any, can you talk a little bit about the strengths of your culture and the ways sometimes those strengths get turned into problems? You know, it's like, I mean, I grew up in a Jewish family in New York City, and the stereotype of the Jewish mothers in New York was that they wanted all their sons to be doctors. That was the stereotype. And education is incredibly emphasized. It's like, and the thing I concluded as an adult was that it was related to the fact that Jews were misplaced so many times. They were kicked out of their living places so many times, that education was the one thing you could bring with you. It was the only thing you could take with you. And that's sort of how I think about it. But it also gets like extreme, where there's too much pressure and there's too much, this focus on success and fitting in so you don't get kicked out of another culture. I mean, I just felt that so much. And there was also a lot of emphasis on, what's that called? When you try to fit in with the culture, you try to act like the people around you. Assimilation, there was a lot of that. Can you just talk a little bit about the cultures you grew up in and what you think the strengths are, and how they might become challenges in any way?
I'm happy to. Let's see, as education was highly valued in my culture, my growing up as well, because that was something that my maternal grandmother finished 8th grade, and then she helped care for her family because her mother died, and then she went on to become a housewife. So that the love, sort of ambition and determination was drilled into myself and my siblings very early on. And also, like you said, it was the assimilation. So we were one of like the first Black families to be in a all-white suburb in New Jersey. And so our parents told us, you have to work 2 or 3 times as hard to be considered half as good. And so there was a lot of emphasis on performing academically with my brothers, with athletics, and fitting in. But I think sometimes to the detriment of, we lost a little bit of ourselves in that process. And sometimes that you can then be seen as very one-dimensional, or too ambitious, or too, like that you think you're better. That could be sort of, it gets like this kind of hard work and aspiration then gets twisted around, and okay, so now you're not in your place anymore. So those are some things I can think of as examples of how sort of strengths can be twisted around and work against us. And I think, for just one thing I'll say with my family, is that I think my parents focused a great deal on having us be able to thrive in that environment. And then it was only later on, when we were probably teenagers, that then it was like, oh, wait a minute, they're not in touch with who they are. Like, their identity is we have reconnected to their identity. And that was a mistake. And it came at a great cost.
Losing sort of connection to your culture. Yes. By trying to assimilate so much.
Yes, by trying to fit in and be like everyone else and pretend that like race is not a factor, when in fact it is. and also that what strength can we draw from as Black people, and what have we contributed, and not having that
Have you
was
seen
detrimental.
Have you seen anything in your kids about circling back to roots and being more at ease with the nature of their?
Yeah, yes. I mean, and not to pat myself on the back, but I made very intentional decisions as a parent based on the decisions that my parents made with what was available. You know, they used the resources that were available to them at the time. I was able to raise my children in a more diverse environment. I was very intentional about artwork in my home and what I exposed them to, and them being able to see themselves from like infancy. I was very intentional about that. I didn't wait until they were, you know, in high school to start talking to them about who they are and what their history is. So yeah, and I think that's essential.
Thank
so
you.
they're in a much better place that they're at as adolescents than I was.
Well, you know, when you were talking, I was thinking about, I grew up in a non-Jewish neighborhood, and I always had to explain in the classes about, you know, what Hanukkah was. And I didn't know, I didn't have any education about being Jewish. My parents wanted me to look, you know, like the neighborhood and act like the neighborhood. But then my daughter ended up going to Israel, and she has all these practices that she kind of teaches me about that I never learned about. And I think sometimes the next generation has an easier time than the ones that were trained to assimilate. Nah, did you have any thoughts about this? You were kind of nodding your head.
Yeah, so in my Chinese culture, and I can only speak from my personal experience of being raised by my own parents, I think being in the collectivistic culture, we really deeply care about each other. This parental love is just so profound. And parents really, they do everything for their child. My parents worked 7 days. Each day they work from the morning, maybe from 5 in the morning until 6 or 7 at night. And they did that for the family to provide. And so I had a lot of resources growing up, as much as I could have. So that's really a strength, and the parental love really continues until when the child is an adult. Now I'm already in my 30s, and my parents still provide so much support in all aspects, emotional, financial, from the other side of the world. So that's really a strength. And I think that teach children about what really love and this sort of deep human connection is. So that could turn into a problem because sometimes it can really sort of go over the boundary, and that they're doing so much for you, and that some of the help maybe is not the best at that time, and then that can also sometimes become intrusive. For example, like intrusive, even this word is a Western word, I have to say. Like when I was a teenager, they would read my diary without my permission. And I'm sure I didn't like it, but I probably wouldn't have called it intrusive, because that's what that culture allows parents to do, because the way that they are controlling their child is just different. So that could turn into a problem. And I do want to just quickly go back to my argument about parents' mindfulness. I feel like it's really not something that we need to take. I mean, it would be nice if you take a class and meditate every day, but mindfulness is inherent in our being. We all have this capacity, like prayer or just one moment you can reflect on your value, your feelings, your thoughts. You have that capacity to be mindful. And so how can we prevent from those for the strengths from turning into a problem is when we need for the parents to be mindful. They really need to ask themselves, am I really doing what my child needs or what I need? What am I feeling? What am I thinking? What's my intention? What's my value? So that is what I mean by mindfulness. I don't mean to ask everybody to take a mindfulness class.
No, well, but no, I want to speak to that because just yesterday I was talking to a mom with 3 teenage girls, no less. And she was saying, but if I don't ask her how she's feeling all the time, how am I going to know what's going on with her? And I was like, well, you don't have to know everything that's going on with her. And this was so shocking to her. And I'm like, oh, I see. And I think that now what you're talking about is sort of and sometimes I think it does take another person. I think sometimes we can look inside ourselves, but sometimes we have to talk out loud to someone else and say, when my daughter does this, the story I tell myself is this, and then say it out loud and then have the other person hear you. I think that Na's focus on this invitation to be self-aware is very important. Mindfulness just means paying attention to what your senses are noticing. What's happening in my body? What am I smelling? What am I seeing? It's being aware. And Katina described exactly, parents are on the run. They're on the run. And we know from Ohio State University study that 66% of working parents are burnt out. And what they mean by that is not enough bandwidth to parent. They're more harsh. They're more punishing. They feel distant from their kids. I mean, because the tasks they're being asked to do are not reasonable. The expectations they have from work, themselves, the culture is asking them to do more than we are capable of doing. That's what's happening around us. So I think that the challenge that we're all kind of coming together about is inviting self-awareness in a time of such earlier you quoted Bruce Perry as talking about relational poverty. I don't think just children are experiencing relational poverty. I think we're all experiencing relational poverty. We're not just sitting down in the playground and talking to another parent for an hour. It's not happening. Katina, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I agree with everything. And in the case of Puerto Ricans and assimilation, my dissertation was in the process of acculturation, because it happens to be that because we have this constant mobility, even when you have been born and raised here, you identify yourself as Puerto Rican, and we have learned to code switch, cultural code switch, language code switch, behavioral code switch. And, it's like from the door out, I am, according to the needs and wants of society. From the door in, I am in charge. I rule. My chancleta, which is my slipper, will fly if needed to make you do what I want you to do until you're 99.9. If you live in my house, that's it. On the other hand, one thing in terms of relational poverty that I think we still have as Latino families is that the group is very important. So the extended family and the family of relationships, right? There's a term that escapes my mind right now. It's important, and so you have extra supports that many families do not have in our society right now. So yes, we do have relational poverty. Still, the group is important to some of our families, and for the Puerto Rican families themselves, they have learned to come in and out of environments. The other families, other Latino families cannot afford doing that because they are undocumented and they have to hide all the time. Mm-hmm. And then their children, when they realize, and I have heard this from kids, I'm an American. I don't want to belong. And is horribly painful to the parents. So,
and it's the
complicated.
That's part of the trauma. I mean,
yes.
You know, so I want to thank you all. This feels like just the beginning of something very important. At Peace at Home, we're always challenging ourselves, to talk about what action steps can you take, what's going to be helpful. If there's one thing each of you would say to parents who want to be sensitive both to their own culture and to help raise children who are going to be sensitive to other cultures and accepting and caring, is there one just strategy or idea or thing to think about, one action step or even thought that you would just share with parents that can build peace at home and peace on earth, which is ultimately, it starts at home, but any one idea? And I guess I'm going to start by saying, I'm going to try to build in when I'm teaching parenting, actually. I'm going to encourage people to be curious about the parents of their friends, parents of their kids' friends, and to try to learn about their approaches to parenting and learn about their thoughts about parenting so we can understand.
I would add to that, to maybe honoring their most compassionate instincts or intuitions. I've done a lot of work with very young mothers who have all these intuitive instincts that, their baby cries, they want to pick up their baby, and then they hear a voice telling them, don't pick that baby up because you're spoiling the baby, right? And like, it's sort of, usually what feels intuitive is often in tune with like your better self. And so to be able to honor that within yourself and with your child, because and then you sort of, it's like paying it forward. So then your child can be compassionate and curious about other kids and their experiences and knowing there might be more to the story. And I think that does start with compassion.
Thank you, Tanika.
Thank you.
And Tanika, you just said what I was going to say, the word compassion. I think I would encourage all parents to do whatever you can periodically reflect yourself, your interaction with your child, and your relation with the world and your experiences, and bring compassion into that reflection. I think, this sort of kindness to yourself and to your child is so important and needed today in the world we're facing. And in that reflection, wisdom and compassion will emerge. Every day, 5 minutes, if that's not possible, every other day or every week, whatever you can, to just sit quietly, maybe write down, a journal, whatever you can reflect, and that will really sort of re-steer your ship in the life.
It's beautiful, both of you. I was going like, oh my God. I would add just to help parents, to help myself, everybody, just to focus in the here and now. So just for right now, I'll be kind. Just for right now, I won't be angry. Just for right now, I'll be thankful. And that helps you in the instant slow down enough so that you can think clearer and you can be kinder. Yes, and more compassionate towards yourself.
Oh, this has been amazing. I can't, when I feel moved, I have trouble talking. So I'm going to try to get coordinated here.
You have trouble talking?
I do. Oh, there are moments. And I just want to deeply thank you all. I want to honor you all. I feel like you all spoke from your mind and your heart, each one of you. And it's what I love about Peace at Home Parenting. I want to remind folks that are here that you can always reach us at solutions@peaceathomeparenting.com. and that Na and Tanika and Katina are among our esteemed teachers. And we are deeply grateful for this time together. And I think we're going to come together some other times to talk about this because it's so important. And we're getting thanks from our participants. And we will continue this. We will continue this. This was inspiring. Thank you, everybody.